11 o'clock on your Friday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you, getting ready for a full weekend of Gamecock Sports. Got baseball in action today, starting off against Belmont. Women's team in action as they continue on with their regular season after wrapping up the SEC regular season crown last night against Alabama. And the men's team in action taking on Ole Miss coming up tomorrow on the road out there in Oxford. We're going to jump right into that conversation now. Joining us on the Love Chevrolet phone lines from Revel Grove covering Ole Miss basketball is Neil McCready. Neil, first of all, thanks so much for taking some of your time with us on this Friday morning. This is a Gamecock team that is looking to get itself back on track after suffering two tough losses to Auburn and LSU in the past two games. They're going into a very tough road environment on the road in Oxford, a place that Ole Miss has only lost once this season. What is so tough about playing down there in Oxford that teams are having trouble with this year?
It's kind of a new thing because they haven't played well at home the last several years. They've played pretty well at home this year. As you mentioned, Auburn got them in that second half, but they've won a bunch of close games. They've been able to Chris Beard's done a really good job of getting people excited about their team and their program and that kind of thing. But, I mean, you were talking about South Carolina struggling here of late. Ole Miss has really struggled of late, too. I mean, you go back and they beat Mississippi State at home a couple weeks ago, and at that moment, it was like, I think their odds of making the NCAA tournament were up in the 80-something% range, and since then they've only won one game, and that was very, very close at home against a bad Missouri team that hasn't won a league game yet. They lost. They're getting into a really bad habit of having a very bad half every game. They had a bad half in Columbia against the Gamecocks, and they had a bad half against Auburn, a bad second half in Starkville the other night against Mississippi State. They're reeling a little bit. I mean, this is a game that I think if you look at it from an Ole Miss perspective, it's an absolute must-win. I don't see outside of winning the SEC tournament, of course, but which is not realistic. There's really no path to an NCAA tournament at-large bid that doesn't include a win over South Carolina at home tomorrow.
Hey, Neil, appreciate you doing this, man. This is Wes. What, other than just in general the bad halves, what has it been specifically in your eyes that has led to this little stretch where they've lost 4 of 5?
Yeah, they just haven't played well on defense. That's really what it is. They get a lot of lapses. They get caught looking. They get caught kind of flat-footed. I think they have taken some of their offensive struggles to the defensive end. They don't rebound the ball particularly well. Now, they rebounded it okay against Mississippi State the other night. State's a really good rebounding team, and Ole Miss matched them. I think it was 39-39. But they give up offensive rebounds in just droves, and it kills them. They give up a lot of second-chance points. And then on the offensive end, Wes, their problems are there's a lot there. Like, this is a team that they cobbled together. Beard got the job in March. He got Matthew Morrell to stay. He got Jamin Breakfeld to stay. He added a bunch of pieces from all over the place. They don't really have a true point guard. They don't really have enough kind of complementary wings to do some of the things on offense that they'd like to do. And then defensively, yes, they have size in Musa Cisse and Jamarian Sharp, but you can play Sharp off the court with just lateral movement. And Cisse has a tendency to get in some foul trouble. I don't think he's 100% healthy. He got hurt back before the season, and I think he's just kind of rounding his way into full health. And they just have some guys that are not elite defensive players. They have some guys who probably should be the third option on offense who end up being the second option, guys who are should be the fourth option on offense with the third. They're just kind of a player or two short in some spots. And look, they've done a good job, and they put themselves in position where if they could win tomorrow, they have a realistic path to 10 SEC wins, and that would probably get them an at-large bid. But it's skin of the teeth stuff. I mean, there's just not a lot of margin for error with them because of their limitations as a roster.
The SEC as a whole, one of the things that is one of my favorite reads just across the sport, across the SEC, is your 10 weekend thoughts on rebelgrove.com. And I know one of the things that you do is you rank the teams weekly throughout the SEC. Give our listeners a sense of where you have South Carolina right now in the conference and then where you have Ole Miss as well.
Yeah, I've got Ole Miss like 8th, 10th-ish, 9th-ish. I mean, I was kind of high on LSU a couple of weeks ago based on some conversations I'd had with people, so their resurgence has not shocked me. Like, we know when they won in Columbia against South Carolina, I wasn't just stunned the way that others were. You can kind of see that coming. I've got South Carolina in that 6 range. I mean, I thought, I hope nobody gets offended by this, I thought they maybe overachieved in the first half of the league season, which is a credit to them. Those wins count. But I sort of expected a regression to the mean a little bit. I mean, that's such a dramatic jump from as bad as they were a year ago to, where they were at the halfway point. And for Ole Miss, it was kind of the same thing. Ole Miss was awful last year. And, they were playing much better. And you just kind of wondered if some of this was them playing above their heads a little bit and that they would, sort of fade back to the pack. So I like Carolina's team. I like the way that they play. I'm not surprised that they've struggled a little bit lately. People have scouted them now. You have a better look at them. You're seeing teams for a second time. It's harder to, trick teams. Not that they got. I'm not saying they were smoke and mirrors. I'm just saying I think they surprised some people early, and now you get the best shot. And look, I think the top of the league is very clearly Alabama. And then after that, it's in some degree Auburn, Tennessee. And then after that, I think it's Kentucky, Florida. I like the Gators a lot. I think that's a good team. They're super close to 11 conference wins. They don't have them, but they're right there. I'm surprised A&M has struggled the way that it has. And then I think, Carolina's probably right there above A&M. And then Ole Miss, LSU are probably just behind A&M. Ole Miss gets Texas A&M at home to finish the season, Chris. So that's a game that they'll have to win as well. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think the league's good. I don't think the league's awesome. I think there are some bad teams at the bottom of the league. Some of those teams are still playing fairly well. Arkansas is playing pretty well right now. LSU, of course. Georgia gives you a game every time you play them. Missouri is still competing despite the fact that they're abysmal. Really the only team that looks kind of like it has some quit in them is Vanderbilt. Everybody else still shows up and can beat you, but it's not like there's 6 or 7 teams in the SEC that could go to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. That's just not the case. It's not nearly as good of a league, in my opinion, as the Big 12.
Again, talking to Neil McCready from Rebel Grove, previewing tomorrow's matchup between South Carolina and Ole Miss. You mentioned it's been a little bit of a rough stretch for Ole Miss as of late, losing 4 out of the last 5, including that one to South Carolina just a couple weeks ago at Colonial Life Arena. What's your overall assessment of how this season has been for Chris Beard and your number 1 down there in Oxford?
Well, they got off to a kind of an interesting start because they played a lot of games against, frankly, some very average teams and some bad teams. They played Detroit Mercy. The ball was in the air on the final second, where if it falls, Detroit Mercy, who I think is 1-26, they would have won. But they won those games. They kept winning one close game after another. And they had some non-league games. They went to Temple and won. They went to UCF and won. They went to San Antonio and beat Cal. So they piled up some wins. I'm not sure that they really played anybody. They had a really good win at home against Memphis, who at the time was playing really well. And then they got into league play, and they've held serve at home. They got a big win in College Station, and they've put themselves in position. But again, here lately, it's kind of felt like it's not a deep team. They're having to play guys 35, 36 minutes a night. There's a little bit of people, I think, self-included, starting to wonder if maybe this team's kind of running out of gas a little bit. Maybe they're a little tired. It's going to take a real coaching effort. It's going to take some luck, and it's going to take them playing much better basketball on the defensive end for them to get to the NCAA tournament. And to Chris Beard's credit, he said from day one, this was not a build year. This was a team that the goal was to make the tournament, and that goal is still in front of them. But they probably have to win 4 of their last 5 games, and one of those games is at home against Alabama. So that should tell you, in terms of the path for them, it's pretty narrow. Doable, but narrow.
Well, and Neil, both of these teams go into this game really needing it. I think South Carolina has built up, enough of a resume that they don't have to have it to make the tournament. But certainly you're looking at, if they lose this game, 3 losses in a row, and you talked about from the Ole Miss perspective how bad they needed as well. So when you kind of get into it, they just played a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of is similar. That game was similar to the MO for both teams right now. You talked about Ole Miss having bad halves. South Carolina has had a habit of getting some leads and then letting them sort of slowly drip away in the second half. It cost them against LSU. What are your keys to this game for both teams tomorrow?
Yeah, I think if you go back and look at that game in Columbia, you're exactly right. South Carolina dominated the first half, and Ole Miss, for the most part, dominated the second half. And it came down to a kind of a one-possession game, which I'm sure Lamont Paris was not particularly thrilled about, given the fact that they had dominated the game throughout the first, 25, 26 minutes. And then for it to come down to that, he probably was not the way he drew that up. It's typical for what Ole Miss has done a little bit. They'll dig themselves some holes. They did it the other night against Mississippi State. They were down 12 in the first half, came back, led by 4 at the half. But you expend a lot of energy trying to close those games. For Ole Miss, man, this is simple, right? They've got to shoot the ball better. They can't dig a big hole. And then against a team like South Carolina that's physical and I think pretty talented in the post, you've just got to hold your own rebounding. And they've gotten better about that lately. They can't give up tons of points in the paint. They've got to rebound the ball. They can't give up a lot of second chance points. And they've got to get the crowd into it and kind of capitalize on that. And, what's interesting, and I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts, we all do this thing about how many bids a conference gets. Carolina's net, I haven't looked at it this morning, but I think it's in the low 50s. Ole Miss's is in like the high 60s. There's a scenario where LSU ends up 11-7 in the league with probably a net in the 70s. What does the committee look at? Is it just net? Is it just strength of schedule? Or do they look at the way teams close? Do they look at the fact that the SEC from a power ranking standpoint is second and they award them 8 bids or 9 bids the way that they have done in the past with leagues that finish that high in the rankings? I just don't know the answer to those things. I mean, I get the question all the time, hey, does Ole Miss get in at 10-8? And my gut answer is I think so. But, 10-8 would probably be, a win over South Carolina, a win at Georgia, a win at Missouri, and a home win against Texas A&M. Is that enough? What does that do to your net? They would have their net high 50s, low 60s. Does that get you in, or does that create a situation where you're praying that most of the mid-major tournaments go chalk? I don't know the answer to that. And I'm sure that Chris Beard and Lamont Paris and Matt McMahon and others would love to know that answer as they kind of head down the stretch. What do you need to do? I'm not crazy. Like, what's killed Ole Miss, I'm giving you guys a long answer. What's killing them is in the non-league. They won 13 games, but most of them were super close. So they didn't have a lot of the game control metrics. And so you're kind of getting punished that you didn't blow teams out in November and December, which I'm not really crazy about that metric. You either win or you don't win. And they won games. And, I don't mind the strength of schedule stuff because you should be encouraged to play a better schedule. And Ole Miss certainly could have played a better non-league schedule, but that's kind of the stuff that they're looking at. The key for Ole Miss is just to score more points than South Carolina tomorrow. However you have to do it. They're not going to have some artistic basketball game all of a sudden. It's just going to be about kind of gutting out a win. But, I think that's the part that for those of us who are covering it and probably for the people inside that building, it's what realistically do you have to do to get into the tournament? And no one really has a firm answer on that.
Certainly seems like a moving target regardless. This game's going to be important for both these teams and their aspirations of making the NCAA tournament coming up here in a couple weeks. Neil, appreciate your time this morning. We're excited to see what happens out there in Oxford tomorrow.
All right, guys, have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Again, Neil McCready from Rebel Grove talking about Oxford men's basketball. We'll jump into the college football conversation. Some interesting news on the recruiting front. The calendar may be set to change coming up as soon as this year. We'll dive into that next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game.
All right, guys, been telling you about them for probably over a year now. Our friends Kendall Walsh, Johnny James over at Gold Line Framing. They want to take care of any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. Maybe you want to upgrade the man cave. Maybe you got a signed print that is just sitting around. You want to put it on your wall. Take it over there. They can upgrade it with a custom framing job, whether that's a Gamecock frame, a Clemson frame, whatever it is that you have in mind, they can handle it for you. Gold Line Framing has been in business for over 20 years. They're over at 511 12th Street, West Columbia. In store, if you want some more ideas, maybe some gift ideas for those people that are hard to buy for in your life. They've got an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items all right there in store. If you got questions or you want to set something up, call them today, 803-739-1337. They're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, that's our friends Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, South Carolina.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Friday. We'll get into college football conversation here in just a second, but baseball is back in action once again this weekend, taking on Belmont. First pitch for today's game coming up at 4 o'clock. Pregame coverage at 3:45 right here on the Game. I got a pair of tickets, actually 2 pairs of tickets to tomorrow's game against Belmont for callers number 4 and 5 right now, 803-404-6100. Callers number 4 and 5, you'll each win a pair of tickets to tomorrow's baseball game against Belmont out at Founders Park. Cap and Dave standing by eagerly to take your calls for that. I want to jump into this. News coming down yesterday, multiple outlets reporting that the early signing period, technically early signing day, is expected to shift around a little bit for this upcoming year. As we know, the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams means that the first round game is going to be played before Christmas. And with the original calendar that we've been dealing with the past couple years, that would put early signing day, or the start of the early signing period, the Wednesday before the college football playoff is set to begin. That was going to unload a whole lot of chaos, and they are trying to alleviate that to some degree by moving it expected to December the 4th, which will be the Wednesday before conference championship games this upcoming year.
I mean, makes sense. I think you look at it and there is no perfect time for any of this stuff we're talking about, whether it's transfer portal. You know, you have the fact that the season is ending and then the portal window is opening, but the season's not ending for everyone. And then you have that going along with, hey, there's actual class that has to be a part of this, and a class schedule and a semester schedule beginning and ending at particular times as well. So you have to be enrolled. So college football is at a very weird point in a lot of ways, but I do think, like, sometimes you look at potential rule changes and you kind of roll your eyes and you say, why? What is this for? I think in this case, it actually does make quite a bit of sense, because you're trying to relieve just some of the overlap that is going on between transfer portal, high school recruiting, and strangely, you just don't really see many of these down-to-the-wire recruiting battles, it seems like, even going into the early signing day that you once did. So it makes sense. I know there'll be a handful of teams that are saying, well, wait, we got to do this leading into conference championship games. That's not ideal either, but that strikes me as maybe the lesser of a couple of evils as far as how this is structured, because you have to have a signing day at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the consensus among coaches, really everybody, I haven't not heard from anybody that says December's fine, it's good, you know. And so you keep in mind, especially with the college football playoff expanding, right? The month of December is not slowing down. It's going to get worse and worse. And so when you're balancing, you know, teams that are going to play in postseason, let's call it either a bowl game or college football playoff, whatever, you got that. You got class, like you said, Wes. That's a forgotten thing in all this. You got class, academics. Then you have high school and junior college recruiting, mostly high school. And then you have transfer portal recruiting. You've got coaches in that contact period going out on the road, and then you have prospects visiting you. That's too much. That's too much in December. It would be too much if you weren't playing football, but you add the fact in that a lot of teams are playing football in terms of practicing and getting ready in the month of December after the regular season too. My question is, like, I think this is probably a good idea, and Nick Saban pointed out, you know, when the early signing period came out, and I think that was, the 2018 class?
Yep.
We kind of thought, hey, this will probably end up, we don't know for sure, but this will probably end up being the signing day. And it did. That's how it played out. And so it pushed everything back. You had summer official visits started, earlier decisions, all of that stuff came with it. My question is, what are the other corresponding moves with this? You know, and Greg Sankey actually talked to Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports, Commissioner Sankey, and they are throwing around the idea of also, the SEC is making December a dead period. So no prospects visiting, no coaches going out on the road. That would slow things down significantly, right? Now you'd have to adjust the calendar in other ways. They've also talked about doing away with the fall transfer portal window. and only having a spring portal window, which would be fascinating. So I think right now we're at the point where a lot of different ideas are floating around. It seems like the early signing period being moved back to early December is the one that has the most traction, but it seems like there's going to be some corresponding moves here as well.
Now, with those things that Sankey brought up to Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports with potentially making December a dead period and eliminating one of the transfer portal windows, it's easy to say these things. What's the process of getting these kind of things implemented, though?
Well, I think it depends on, what level are we talking about, And I think ultimately it's, I was going to say it'd be at the NCAA level, but they're worried about cookie cakes now.
That's true.
Can't decorate them. Can't decorate a room. And we're going to punish university presidents for some coach talking about NIL with players, apparently. But no, I mean,
It shouldn't be a super difficult process, right?
No. Because the moving back, I mean, it was something. This is the type of thing that would be voted on ultimately by the Division I Council, the NCAA, and it would be put in the bylaws. And I don't know when the next round of meetings where that would actually be done is.
I mean, I think you could realistically see this upcoming class sign in early December as like that. I don't think this is something that's going to have a lot of roadblocks by people just saying, "Hey, this is something I'm willing to fight for." Like I don't think you die on this hill. Like even if you disagree with it, which I can't see many coaches actually disagreeing with this. Like I think this will be met with quite a bit of agreement, and then I think this is just one more step towards what are going to be even greater changes to the calendar. And I think if you look at it, the summer signing period is the next step of what is going to happen because we're moving. Everything's moving up anyway. And then what's the date they said? December 4th?
December 4th. Yep.
So that probably puts you. That's a Wednesday as well. We're sick.
Yep.
See that probably puts you dead in December anyway because there would be no point to even allow. You have a dead period after the signing period anyway.
Yeah.
The way it's structured right now.
That's right.
That's going to kind of automatically, the natural progression would just say, hey, December, you're not hosting high school recruits on your campus. The transfer portal thing, possibly having that would have a big effect on things because you probably, the players and the schools, the coaches want for these players to go through spring practice. And so this would eliminate that. I do think I read somewhere, hey, transfer guys may be able to sign NLIs, which is not NIL, which it's weird to me that they can't already.
Sure.
I don't understand why high school guys can sign them, but transfer portal guys, they commit, and then they're getting ready to enroll, but then they can still bounce around and decommit and all this stuff. I think you would settle things down quite a bit. It wouldn't fix everything, but if you went ahead and signed your transfer portal guys as well, as opposed to waiting for them to enroll. But if you go back, we've seen the trend right now for high school guys. You will see it. You already see it right now. It's February 23rd. All these high school guys are already setting official visits for May 31st and then June. The 90% of those guys will be committed before their high school seasons start. The next step will be just to let them go ahead and sign at the end of the summer.
Yep, absolutely. Again, one of the many things that is hopefully alleviating this college football calendar that so many coaches have brought up here over the past couple of years. So we'll see the official, confirmation on that hopefully here very, very soon. Big win last night for women's basketball, wrapping up another SEC regular season crown. We're from Dawn Staley and some of the players coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
If you're looking for a local company, experts in their field to come out to your home for anything audio-visual, let me recommend our friends at Integrated Media, Michael, Nathan, and their team. They've been to my home. They've been to Wes Mitchell's home, and they can come out to your home or business as well. They can do everything. You've heard me say it, from mounting a television, hiding all the ugly wires so that your presentation looks awesome and that your technology works the way it should. They can do that. They can do everything from that to security and cameras to complete smart home systems where you can bring your home into the modern age. And utilizing your smartphone, you can control your lighting, your thermostat, your sound systems, TVs, security cameras, and your alarms, all just from the touch of a button, whether you're at home or not. It's a pretty awesome thing. Check it out, integratedmediainc.com or 803-948-8327. You can get some examples of their past work, read their reviews, and check out their services. That's integratedmediainc.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, along with you on this Friday morning. Quick reminder about the Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway. If you want to see the Gamecocks take on Clemson coming up next Friday out at Founders Park on March the 1st, all you got to do is go to our YouTube channel, The Game TV, subscribe, then head on over to 1075thegame.com and fill out the form for your chance to win the Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway, again, for next Friday's game at Founders Park between the Gamecocks and the Tigers. Last night, women's basketball in action taking on Alabama at Colonial Life Arena. A pretty routine dominant win, 72-44 for South Carolina, clinching yet another SEC regular season crown and locking up Dawn Staley's 600th career victory as a head coach in women's college basketball. After the game, Ashlyn Watkins and Bree Hall were asked if the dominance of this team was expected this season. Here's what they had to say.
Ashley, you answer first. I feel like it was a new team. Of course, you expect the unexpected. Like, you don't know, honestly. Like, we lost. How many people did we lose?
Like seven. Yeah.
We lost 7 people. Like, that's a lot of people to lose, especially off of a good season that we had. So I guess we didn't expect to be this good. But once we saw that we was this good, we never looked back.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Ashlyn, I'd say the same. We didn't expect to be this good, but when we saw how good we were doing, I think we expected and raised our standards and realized that we can really do this.
Well, they didn't expect to be this good. Maybe they are just good, if not better than maybe some of the teams in the years past that Dawn Staley has coached. Again, locking up the SEC regular season crown last night, #1 seed in the SEC tournament, likely to be a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament once again, and still having the opportunity to pursue that perfection and another national championship. So, again, for a team that had a lot of turnover this year, all their goals still in front of them, and adding another trophy to the case last night with the SEC regular season title.
Yeah, I think this was one of those situations where if you're a fan out there, you have to actually take a moment to sort of appreciate everything that's happening. It sort of is one of those things where winning a regular season SEC championship has almost become expected. And maybe not for this particular team coming into the year, because like the girls were talking about there, the expectations, at least from the outside, were down a little bit. Everybody knew this might be a little bit of a reloading year, although we didn't know exactly what that would mean in terms of the production and the results on the floor. So we've seen this team just keep winning. I think the scary part, the dangerous part for other teams is that this team can still get better. And I imagine Dawn Staley's message to her team was, hey, take a moment to appreciate this, because you don't want to get to a point where you just snub your eyes just an SEC regular season title. You had none of them before Dawn Staley arrived. Mm-hmm. Literally zero. So this is something, if you had the trophy case South Carolina did, if you reversed 10 years in time, this would be something that was celebrated even more. Now, the expectations have been raised to the extent that this is just one step. This is just one moment as far as what are obviously much bigger ultimate goals for this team. But I do think if you're this group, you take a moment to appreciate it. There's a different set of human beings, a different group that's rolled in, a bunch of new players. They accomplished this. They worked very hard to get to this point. Now, I think after you appreciate it, you got to turn your attention to they still can play better, and I think they're still going to need to play better. Like, we still have not seen this entire team hitting on all cylinders, at least as of late. So I think that's going to be very curious to see, very interesting to see how Dawn Staley manages this group moving forward.
Yeah, that South Carolina won by, about 30 points last night. And played that first quarter was so ugly for both teams, South Carolina included. And we've said it all the time. It just goes to show how talented they are, how good they are. Frankly, give Dawn Staley and her staff a ton of credit. I think that's gone undervalued a little bit for how they've navigated this team and how they can play not an A game and still win. Yeah, part of that's talent, but I think we neglect to give Dawn credit for the job that she's done coaching. Is this her best coaching job? Possibly. Let's see what they do
in
the tournament. But this is a team that, I mean, you heard from the players there. Dawn herself has made some comments. They didn't really know what they had. I mean, they lost some alphas off of last year's team. And, yeah, you got a bunch. You're littered with McDonald's All-Americans.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're going to just steamroll everybody. And there's been some ups, there's been some downs, but they've kept things steady. And they've taken this team from, I think this is probably the team that's made the biggest jump from what you thought before the season to where they are now. 26-0, 13-0 in the conference. They're going to win the SEC. Probably going to make another deep run in the tournament, too.
And I think it's important to note, when you look at the past couple games they had leading into last night against Tennessee and Georgia, they didn't look their best. Tennessee was leading in the third quarter going into the fourth quarter of that game the other day, and Georgia had the halftime lead. And obviously, South Carolina played a better second half and was able to pull away on that one. So they hadn't played their best basketball the past couple of nights. And going into last night, Camila Cardoso wasn't playing. She wasn't dressed out. So you wonder, man, could this be another game where South Carolina struggles a little bit? As you mentioned, that first quarter, I think they started off 1 or 12 shooting from the field and ended up 5 of 18 from the field. So not a good start, but obviously glad it in gear in the second quarter and was able to pull away for, again, another 28-point victory last night. So even their roughest stretch of the season, a couple games that maybe looked a little bit shaky this past week, they responded with another dominant victory without their best player, which, again, I think hopefully bodes well for them, going forward here.
Yeah, and I think it was another one of those games where even though Alabama has had a pretty solid year and they can score the basketball, or at least they came into the game being a team you thought could score the basketball, you wouldn't have known it watching the first quarter, but I think, or the second quarter, but I think I still watched this game and I was like, South Carolina's going to win this game easily. There's only been a couple of situations this year, I guess LSU being the main one, where you're sitting there saying they very well could lose this game. And I do think, again, we talked about Chris Wellbaum yesterday. I'm not in the camp of you need to lose a game to reset, to grab their attention, to sort of maybe just lock in what Dawn Staley says she's been preaching in practice, which is that, hey, it's got to be better. We've got to practice a little bit better. You've got to execute. I mean, they're turning the ball over in the first quarter at an alarming rate, but they're just so good against, 99% of the teams you could put on the floor against them, they're still going to end up winning by double digits. And there is a little bit of danger, and this is being completely nitpicky about an undefeated team, but there's a little bit of danger in only having so many opportunities because you're so good of playing a team with the game on the line and knowing you have to execute to win the game. And Dawn Staley has scheduled the most difficult schedule you possibly can on top of playing an SEC schedule, and still it's hard for them to find those situations where you've got 4 minutes left in a basketball game and you've got to go execute to win. And so do you find yourself in that spot in the tournament, and how do you respond to it is going to be the difference between winning a third national title and not doing so. And so I'll be curious to see, again, how does she manage this group? Do we see, obviously we saw them sit Cardoso yesterday. Wellbaum said he thinks they've looked a little tired.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a bye week. They played UConn. Do we see, is there a possibility, I'm completely speculating, is there a possibility we see, is there anybody else that's maybe just been a little bit tired that you say, hey, she's banged up, we're going to give her a night off along the way? Do you almost manage their legs during these final couple of weeks leading into that final tournament run, because you do have way bigger aspirations than just being the SEC regular season champion?
Absolutely, and we'll see what they decide to do coming up on Sunday. Next game on the road, taking on Kentucky and Lexington. Tip-off for that is at 3 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW, at 2:30 on Sunday afternoon. You'll be able to hear the full game on there as well. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. New video game coming out in July. How will some Gamecocks be rated? We'll discuss that next here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on the Game. Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes before the halftime show. Coming up with myself and Terry Ford live out at Griffin Pools and Spas in Lexington, going up until 3. And we'll be leading you right into pregame coverage. We'll lead you into the postgame show, which will lead you into pregame coverage of Gamecock baseball taking on Belmont at 4 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45. I do see the sun starting to poke out a little bit, so hopefully the rain does stay away as the forecast looked a little bit grim a little bit earlier on. So we'll see what happens when 4 o'clock rolls around out at Founders Park. We've talked a lot this week about the details of the new college football video game that is set to come out later this summer. Yesterday, we learned that all 134 FBS teams are going to be in it. By the way, I'm taking Kennesaw State to a national championship. Go ahead and lock that in right now.
Should we give you the Jimbo Fisher plaque?
You should.
Like
a future national championship at some point with the Owls. Hooty hoo. And we know that all scholarship athletes going to have the opportunity to be a part of this game, get $600 and a free copy of the game. So it begs the question, when we're looking at the South Carolina roster, who are going to be the highest rated guys in 2024?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a story about this very thing.
Okay.
Oh man,
We're going all in on the clicks on this game because hey, credit to EA Sports, man. They've done a fantastic job for a game that there was virtually nothing about for months. Their marketing here lately has been fantastic and making it where the players can easily share those graphics like, hey, I'm in the game, and sort of just continuing what was, I would say, a game that just has been right at the cross section of like college football fanatics and gamers for years and was iconic. It's cool to see it back in the public space. So I've actually thought pretty hard about who might be the highest rated guy on the game. I ultimately settled on Rocket Sanders.
I think that's it's an easy one to pull from. Obviously, somebody that's already had success at the college level. At Arkansas being one of the best running backs in the SEC a couple seasons ago. With Spencer Rattler moving on, Xavier Legette not around anymore. You certainly have guys with promise. Nick Harbor, what he was able to show in short flashes last year. Dylan Stewart coming in as a 5-star that I expect would have a pretty decent rating. But as far as the guys that have already been out there and proven it on the field, Rocket Sanders is going to be at the top of that list.
Yeah, and I feel like usually the 5-star guys coming in as freshmen, they limit their upside of their rating just so they're not like completely off the charts by the second, third, or fourth year that they're in a dynasty. So I look at Sanders. He is the perfect combination of he's going to have all the little attributes that will be reflected in a high overall rating. He's got enough experience to where his awareness will have already been raised. And when they start, I don't know how deep they're going to go as far as their roster research on these, which I think will be that's going to be the big determining factor on several of these guys for South Carolina. But Rocket Sanders, he already has a 1,400-yard rushing season in the SEC. He also had 28 receptions that year for 271 yards. He's got the measurables, which will, again, be reflected in the ratings, and he's got credentials as a guy who's done it all. So I think Sanders, I don't want to say he's a lock, but a safe bet. I projected him as a 93.
Okay, I think that's fair. From a national standpoint, does anybody get like a 99? That's like that's the top grade in Madden, and that's reserved for the elite of the elite. I mean, who's in the conversation for that next year?
Someone from the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central, because I started a thread about this, they went back. This is next level. They went to the last NCAA football game and looked up the old ratings for guys. Clowney was a 99.
Okay.
According to this.
And
I trust him.
In the last... the last game, he would have been a 99.
He was a 99.
You mean defensive end number 7?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was not Clowney. The best pick, by the way, I'm going to get back to your other question, Tyler. The best pick for South Carolina was Hunter Rogers being a 99 long snapper.
That's fantastic. I think he was the first one to confirm to be in the game from South Carolina, so why not, right?
He'll be highly rated. Kai Kroger. I think,
Kai actually.
If Kai's throw accuracy isn't a 99, something's wrong here.
That's going to be, they're going to have to figure out, like, how to make that even out, But, yeah, I think Rocket's a safe bet. I'm really intrigued. Where will they have Sellers because he's younger?
Sure.
Where will they have Harbor because they'll have his speed very high? Like, do they look at the ups? How much do they look at upside versus production? To your point, Wes. Nicky Manwari's another one I think is going to be up there.
I've got him second.
Got him second. Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of fun with this in the lead up to this game before our eventual tournament to see who the greatest player
We got
out
to
of
see
all
if
of
we
us
can
is.
leverage our contacts to get an advanced copy on this thing is what we got to do.
We'll see what we can do. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next is the halftime show. Myself and Terry Ford out of Griffin Pools and Spas in Lexington. Come by and see us. Going to be giving away some tickets to Carolina and Clemson baseball coming up next weekend. Josh says you got to jump in the pool to get those tickets, though. So bring your swimsuit and a towel. Again, Griffin Pools and Spas out there in Lexington on North Lake Drive. It's coming up next here on the game.
Gamecock Central Takeover Hour is over here on the game. So it's lunchtime, guys.